I'm absolutely not ashamed to admit that I've stood in front of the mirror a couple times and screamed Kaio-Ken like I was trying to ascend. Shoot, I played sports, so when I was younger, I would try to transcend to that next level, thinking to myself, okay, Kaio-Ken times 2, Kaio-Ken times 3. Yes, honestly, me saying this is making me cringe, but when I was younger, I 100% did this, thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get an extra boost of speed, extra boost of strength, and so on. But of course, that is from an anime, and unfortunately, my dreams of utilizing the Kaio-Ken to its fullest extent are absolutely impossible. But somebody that I would love to see actually learn and utilize the Kaio-Ken, because I believe it would fit pretty well into the story, or also just into the verse itself, would be Tanjiro. Tanjiro would be an interesting candidate for learning the Kaio-Ken because we've seen that his durability is absolutely insane. Now, of course, I'm going to have to make a couple tweaks and, do a couple things because I'm sure a lot of you will immediately say that Tanjiro would get his body ripped in absolute two if he utilizes the Kaio-Ken, and also how would he even learn it. Of course, I'm not sending him to King Kai's world, so we're going to be starting this story a little bit differently. We're going to be talking about a story of Demon Slayer where his father actually gathers information on a hidden technique known as the Kaio-Ken. This technique is basically hidden to literally everybody, and also hidden to time entirely. And eventually, when his father would pass away, he would leave those teachings. He would leave all the teachings of the Kaio-Ken, and eventually Tanjiro would stumble across it. At the end of the day, he did miss his father and misses him greatly, so when he stumbles across this so-called book of learning, or more or less this whole journal involving something known as the Kaio-Ken, he begins to read, and it talks about inner strength and outer strength, and enhancing one's physical attributes, speed, strength, durability, whatever, all you can think about. And on top of that, does a mad sacrifice and strain to one's body. Now, this would kind of confuse Tanjiro. I mean, Tanjiro has never seen the light of fighting, really, outside of his father himself, and basically his whole actions of defeating a giant bear. Now, beyond that, Tanjiro hasn't really been in anything. Tanjiro hasn't gone through much. Now, he will go through hell very, very soon, but he hasn't gone through anything that would warrant him actually learning this so-called Kaio-Ken technique. But he keeps it on him and keeps it near him as much as possible, because that's the reminder that his father is still with him. And eventually, when he would go off to help the village nearby, then come back the next day, and his whole family would be, well, gone, and it would lead him to more or less taking care of Nezuko. This would be the first time he would take these teachings to heart, because there would be a very soon time that he would actually need to utilize these teachings of Kaio-Ken. And that would be when he first not only meets Giyu Tomioka, but also when he meets Urokodaki. Now, his first meeting with Tomioka would see the actual first bit of Kaio-Ken. Now, it's just a small fraction, not even like a ×2. It's the base Kaio-Ken. It just gives him a bit of a speed boost and a tiny strength boost, but it also shows Tomioka that this kid might be some sort of prodigy. Maybe he carries something within his bloodline. He's not sure, but he's special, and he can tell right off the bat because this kid has no formal training, only utilizing the little tiny fraction of knowledge he has from the quote-unquote Kaio-Ken that obviously Tomioka doesn't know about, but he would utilize that small fraction of his learning to actually fend off Tomioka and eventually prove that Nezuko was not the normal demon. This would lead them to Urokodaki, and once he meets Urokodaki is where things begin to take off tremendously, because he begins to explain to Urokodaki that his father left teachings of something known as the Kaio-Ken, and he begins to tell him that he should try and learn it, or like himself should try to learn it throughout the training that he does go through during this Demon Slayer-like training. Now, this Demon Slayer-like training is far from easy, but let's just say when he combines the training of the Kaio-Ken and also the Demon Slayer training, trying to learn both, it does slow down the process of both of them at the same time. But once he gets a grasp for kind of the breathing style and Kaio-Ken, is where things begin to accelerate tremendously. Tanjiro begins to realize he can actually amplify his strength and speed by 2 times, Kaio-Ken times 2. Now, this would benefit him in practically every fight you can possibly think of, and makes him extremely powerful even against some of the fastest demons alive. But of course, he doesn't have that much strength or base strength at this moment, so it's not actually as important as you'd possibly believe. It's kind of the idea of he's able to lift 100 pounds, and with Kaio-Ken times 2, he would be able to lift 200 pounds. I know it's never that simple, but that's kind of the way you have to look at it when Tanjiro's at such a base level. Maybe even throw in a different multiplier for his headbutts, because we all know that his headbutts are absolutely lethal at every stage of the game. Now, with that said, he would go on to do or utilize the Kaio-Ken also his water breathing techniques at the final selection. And this is where people begin to take massive notice of who Tanjiro is and also what he's truly capable of. Because Tanjiro goes into the final selection and utilizes Kaio-Ken and begins to dash around at speeds that really many people are taken back from, especially the other Demon Slayers, or soon to be Demon Slayers, because Tanjiro is glowing with a red aura and emitting like an aura and a ki or some sort of like sense around him that is so different than anyone has ever thought to see in their lives. I mean, what is this? What is this kid even capable of? How can he do that? And this is something that Tanjiro himself wouldn't be able to explain in like a small order, because he's literally only able to use Kaio-Ken times 2, or his body would literally break down and shatter itself entirely, and even Kaio-Ken times 2 cannot be utilized for long periods of time. But luckily, Kaio-Ken can be used in bursts, in which he's able to kill the hand demon and many other demons within that area. So once he's able to do that, that's perfect for him to just kind of hang out and chill and just protect basically everyone, or also himself, for a good little bit of time. But he exterminated practically all the demons within the forest, so they're kind of okay and safe. Like, they don't even gotta worry about anything for a good little minute now. Now, with that said, we then lead into the end of the final selection, where he meets the survivors. But this time around, there's quite a few more survivors. But Tanjiro is going to have a far different path than he did normally. Normally, he would go back to Urokodaki, speak with him, take Nezuko, and go on this minor journey before he finally meets the Hashira. But at the same time, this is no normal Tanjiro, and he's shown glimpses of what, well, Giyu Tomioka calls a prodigal kind of ability, or a prodigy-like ability. Now, this is perfect because this will lead Tanjiro to meeting the Hashira far sooner, and very, very soon they'd all realize that his potential isn't attached to himself, but actually attached to teachings that are unknown to anyone. Now, Tanjiro would obviously go back and meet Nezuko and stuff like that, but would then be taken along to bring him, well, to the Hashira mansion. Now, this is where you, way earlier on, deal with Nezuko actually being a demon and people not being okay with it. Tanjiro makes it very clear, though, that he will just walk out right now and just leave it at that and never speak or even be around any of them right now if it means that his sister cannot be involved in his life. And he explains that Nezuko has gone through quite a few things and has shown that she is very protective over him, even though she's a demon. And they don't want to believe it, but even Giyu can vouch for this. Giyu vouches that Nezuko actually protected Tanjiro during this time. And yes, they're not maybe acquainted as well as they could be, but Urokodaki and also Giyu would agree to basically end their own lives if Nezuko ended someone else's life, a human's life. Now, this would put them in a pretty awkward situation, because at the end of the day, Nezuko would still be more or less hated by everybody, or at least some or most of the Demon Slayers, or to a large extent not trustworthy or not trusted, which is obvious because she is a demon. I mean, how would you trust a demon? But Tanjiro would tell them that if they can trust Nezuko, or at least treat her properly, that he can show them all exactly what his technique is, and which would actually shock everybody, because at the end of the day, how is this a technique? They don't understand, they don't get it, and so on. Now, this would still be kind of like a hard thing for Tanjiro to even kind of explain, but he would show them the journals, but then also tell them that his father made it very clear that this is a dangerous technique, so dangerous that he should never allow it to be in the wrong hands, and also never allow it to basically be copied or utilized by someone that can't handle it. Now, that is something that is going to be thought about, or has to be thought about during this time, because I'm sure there's quite a few Hashira that can handle it, but a lot of these other normal Demon Slayers would not be able to handle it. And then we're also dealing with the fact that if you utilize this technique, it might even affect your breathing style. And that's where this falls in line to the story. Because yes, Hashira utilizing, well, Kaio-Ken would be absolutely insane. Would be one of the most overpowered things ever. But here's the thing that makes Tanjiro different, is that he used the Kaioken and also a breathing style, or learned both of them simultaneously. So he's able to actually figure out how to utilize both of them in cohesion, you could even say. But the Hashira will not be able to. So this makes it extremely difficult for the Hashira to utilize it, but there's someone else that could utilize it in the future, but for now we won't talk about that, at least not at this moment. Tanjiro would still be put on missions, and quickly it's obvious that his power scale, or power level, wink wink, is pretty high up there with even some of the Hashira. Maybe not quite Hashira level, but pretty damn close, and the more grasp he gets on breathing styles, concentration breathing, and obviously the Kaio-Ken, he'll continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And honestly, it's a complete exponential curve because of how much he's going to multiply over and over and over and over again. And frankly, if he can get up his Kaio-Ken to absurd levels, and absurd levels means like 5 to like 10, not 100, don't get me wrong, that's not gonna happen, but 5 to 10 is absurd levels, because that is multiplying your strength by 5 times the amount of its original strength. And his strength is gonna be impressive already because of his breathing style and his training regimen. And this would lead him to more or less sweeping through a lot of these normal fights that he'd go through. But of course, I think we still need to talk about him most likely approaching the city that really never sleeps. He eventually would enter a city that's all lit up and everything, but he would approach this city far later than Muzan would actually. So he wouldn't even run into Muzan in this story because of the conflict of time that he actually went through. But he would still meet one other person, that being Lede Tameo. Now, he wouldn't have to fight any demons, but he would speak to Lede Tameo about Nezuko, about who he is, and about what they should do, and about finding a cure for Nezuko. And all of those things get put into swing relatively quickly. Now, this would lead him to the mansion where he would obviously meet Zenitsu and Inosuke, but quickly he would dispose of Kyogai and many other demons in there. It wouldn't be even a chance. Inosuke would dive through that roof, not realizing that the demon has already been defeated and slashed in pieces by Tanjiro, because these demons do not scale to this version of Tanjiro, especially one that has already met the Hashira and has spent at least a little bit of time within the Hashira confines, you could call it, or the Butterfly Mansion confines. Now, this would lead to them kind of learning who they are and also talking to each other and so on. And one person I could also see maybe actually utilizing Kaio-Ken because of his durable body and his just malleable body from living in the wild would be Inosuke. But it would be very difficult for him to learn Kaio-Ken because of his just mental blocks there. He's not the smartest guy in the world, and he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but at the same time, with enough time, he might be able to actually up his game through the use of the Kaio-Ken. But that's something we'll talk about a little bit later, because we're going to go on to Rui's Mountain, or Mount Natagomo. Now, Rui's Mountain is kind of the same thing as you would expect. Yes, I know Tanjiro would maybe have a little less sharpening of his breathing style, but his Kaio-Ken would make up for that by and large, and his kind of durability and his usage of Kaioken times 2 would feel more and more comfortable, and soon he would be able to actually get a kill on, yes, it is technically a lower moon, or one of the 12 Kizuki, excuse me, but at the same time, we know that Rui was pretty weak because he spread his blood thin. Now, this isn't even the challenge that comes first, and this isn't even the truest effect that, well, the Kaio-Ken would have, because we know that Rui versus Tanjiro was already a very close fight, and we know that Tanjiro taking on Rui in general was a fight that he was almost able to win. Now, obviously, in my opinion, he would be able to win this fight, or this time around, putting him on that level of quote-unquote Hashira. But once he gets to the point where they're all starting to do rehabilitation and training and all of those things, this is where things get crazy, because there's one person that Tanjiro meets, and one person that basically the Wind Hashira, yes, the Wind Hashira forces his own brother, Genya, to actually speak with Tanjiro. Now, this doesn't go perfectly well, but the Wind Hashira makes it very clear that his brother doesn't have a breathing style, that he cannot use a breathing technique, so he needs to learn the Kaio-Ken, which makes him a perfect candidate for that. And with some struggle and some push and pull and stuff like that, I mean, eventually he would give in to learning it. Tanjiro would be hesitant because, I mean, the guy just isn't a nice dude, but eventually he would come around and he would learn that, honestly, Genya's not that bad of a guy. He was kind of like, you know, kind of crazy and psychopathic, it seemed, at one point during the final selection, but now he's not that bad of a guy. And while teaching Genya and also training with him, Inosuke would vow that he's going to learn how to actually utilize the Kaio-Ken, in turn making it so that Tanjiro, Genya, and also Inosuke would enter the realm of the Kaio-Ken. Now, I wouldn't give Zenitsu the Kaio-Ken, and I know, some of you are probably like, oh, that's lame, give him the Kaio-Ken. I mean, everyone else is getting it anyways, but not everyone else is gonna get it. I don't think the Hashira are going to get it, just because, or at least not right now, but just because, I mean, like I said, the whole breathing style conflict. One doesn't have a breathing style at all, or can't use breathing techniques, and the other one is built for the Kaio-Ken in terms of his body, his durability, and stuff like that. Now, talking about Zenitsu, he's kind of on the other side of the wall there, right? We're talking about someone that can't really perfect his breathing style, and frankly, he just has never been that good at doing stuff like that. So he wouldn't be able to learn the Kaio-Ken. As sad as it is, it's the truth. I just don't think he'd be the best candidate for it. Now, this is where we lead into kind of like this odd situation, because we are now making Genya more of a main, or like kind of like a more major based character. So I could see him actually being involved with Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu a little bit more. So maybe even adding him to the squad that goes to face down Akaza. And yes, I'm talking about Akaza because, let's be honest, the Enmu fight will not be anything crazy, would be very simple, and the Akaza fight would actually be a challenge. But with this said, it does talk a lot, or we're going to talk a lot about how the level of Kaio-Ken they're at would be kind of the idea of if they could actually defeat Akaza. Because they'll have Tanjiro, they'll have Rengoku, but is Inosuke and Genya on the same level of Kaio-Ken, giving them the ability to actually go head to head with Akaza? I just don't think so. I do think, though, that Tanjiro is strong enough to kind of help Rengoku out. I don't think it's going to be easy, but there actually might be a world where, well, Rengoku doesn't die, which is fantastic. Now, I want to bring this up before it's probably brought up in the comments. The reason why I'm even bringing this up, that Akaza would be there, is, in my mind, is that basically Muzan would kind of put the pieces together that this Tanjiro person more or less has met this met with Lady Tamayo and also defeated Rui and so on. So that's why Akaza would show up. But I wouldn't put it past you to believe that Akaza wouldn't show up at all, because the point of Akaza actually being at the Mugen Train was to kill Tanjiro. And that was the whole point. You sent him out because he was like, hey, go get this guy, kill him, end him, whatever, blah, 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 right? So that was the whole point. But in my opinion, that's kind of where my head goes with Akaza, in terms of why he would be sent here. I think Tanjiro would be looked at as kind of a important factor, especially with his earrings on. Muzan could maybe see through another demon's eyes or something like that and be like, okay, this guy needs to die ASAP because he reminds me too much of the one, the only Yorichi, right? That's where my head goes. Now, this would lead us into the Entertainment District arc, and I think it's going to be a little bit broken record for me to say that a Kaio-Ken Inosuke and a Kaio-Ken Tanjiro would do far better, far greater, and they'd be able to absolutely sweep through. And frankly enough, I don't think Tengen would even get hurt here. I think even if Inosuke only has _2, he's able to now keep up with Daki way better. Maybe even keep up or somewhat keep up with someone like Gyutaro. At least not to the extent that he's going to get speed blitzed and absolutely, impaled. But I don't think that's going to happen at all. I honestly do think this team up fight is far easier, especially if you decide we're going to put Genya on this team as well. But we probably wouldn't, just because Genya wouldn't really go off as a female. I mean, he just doesn't look feminine at all. I mean, he is a big dude, shredded to the gills, so he probably wouldn't be able to be on this mission. But we would have him on the mission of the Swordsmith's Village, which all of you would understand very, very greatly, that having Genya actually be able to not only utilize Kaio-Ken, but his ability to actually devour demons and get their blood demon arts and utilize those and have his guns and so on. That helps him so much. It actually makes him extremely useful, especially in the fights to come. Makes him very useful. And luckily enough, we have the Hashira training arc coming up right after this. Now, with the Hashira training arc, a lot of it goes to people learning the Kaio-Ken. Now, I think this is where people would quickly realize that the Kaio-Ken is not for everybody, because a lot of the normal Demon Slayers would go completely out of the fight because their bodies would atrophy and completely break down on them. Now, that's a scary thought, but I feel like that's the truth. And of course, this would make some realizations happen that maybe you have to be in the perfect basically mind state and also the perfect situation to actually utilize the Kaio-Ken. Kind of like what Tanjiro has been saying, but nobody has been listening to him, I guess. Now, that's kind of the idea behind this whole sequence, but I want to talk about a couple things, because this is pretty major in my opinion, and that's going into the Infinity Castle. So obviously Tanjiro is going to have a good time. Tanjiro is going to have a way easier time against Akaza, especially with Giyu by his side, and frankly enough, being able to probably utilize ×5 to ×7, maybe even higher version of Kaio-Ken. But he does need to pace himself, because at the end of the day, we know the end goal is Muzan, so you got to do what you got to do. Now, with that said, I do think the Akaza fight is far easier, and I think Akaza gets shut down pretty early on. But what about the Kokushibo fight? We know that Genya's involved, and probably with an earlier defeated Akaza, we'll probably get Giyu and also Tanjiro helping out as well. But Genya probably wouldn't die here. I know Kokushibo is super powerful, and I'm not saying that Genya's gonna straight up destroy him. Definitely not. But he's going to be able to at least survive, dodge some blows that would have put him out for good, and actually have him survive to a large extent. which would be awesome because, to be honest, it is kind of sad that all Saname wanted was his brother to live a normal life, to live a life that he can have a wife, have kids, and just a boring life that was safe. And he would die. That's literally what happens at the very end, and it's such a sad moment. But this time around, it doesn't happen, or at least doesn't happen in the Infinity Castle, right? And it doesn't happen in this regard because of his speed and his ability to actually get out of harm's way relatively easily. Now, you may be wondering, how would the Muzan fight go? I mean, we are dealing with Inosuke with Kaio-Ken. We're dealing with a Tanjiro with Kaio-Ken and a Genya with Kaio-Ken. And arguably, maybe some of the Hashira have a grasp on a lower version of Kaio-Ken. So, wow, I just said that word a bazillion times. Sorry about that. But yeah, let's go on. Now, Muzan would have immense trouble with every single person here. Truly immense trouble. Just because they're all so coordinated in sync and stuff like that. And we're talking about faster versions of these characters. And this would lead into a absolute dismantling of Muzan. And luckily enough, of course, they do have the whole the cure for Muzan, so he's getting weaker and weaker. And the sunlight, yes, would be the eventual doom of Muzan, but I feel like a lot more of these people that normally die just wouldn't die, which would give the Demon Slayers, and a lot of them, especially the Hashira, a happy ending. We're talking about Mitsuri and Iguro actually being able to be together and have a family. We're also talking about the two brothers, Genya and Saname, actually not dying. And Saname is able to not only have a life for himself, but also watch his brother have a life for himself. And you can talk about more and more people, so on and so forth. I mean, at the end of the day, these people all died in the heat of battle in the original, but this time around, I think you would get the cliche "no one dies" of some anime tropes that you would see. That this time around, for sure, no one would die. And I must say one little caveat: if I was to see someone die, it would 100% be one of the Kaio-Ken users. Tanjiro could genuinely croak during this final fight, because if he sees or feels, just based on his power, that he needs more Kaio-Ken and cranks it up, his whole body might shut down. We talked about this. His whole body straight up might shut down and he would die because of, you could call it self-sabotage, or you can call it just mass strain. But people like Inosuke who love stretching the boundaries, I mean, if they're not careful, Kaio-Ken could rip them apart. But we've seen it time and time again. Demon Slayers are not afraid of sacrifice. Demon Slayers are far from afraid of sacrifice. So, of course, they would risk everything and risk their bodies to actually end the fight. So, the idea of what if Tanjiro learning the Kaio-Ken would not only affect him, but would affect every single other Demon Slayer that would ever exist. Now, with that said, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below. Quickly, I believe before this video came out, you should be getting like a Deku What If or something like that in the old style. Probably no editing, or like kind of like some background gameplay, maybe like a Minecraft gameplay. If you don't see that, then that means I failed as a creator. You should see something, at least like a part 1 or something like that. I know some of you are from my older content and really enjoyed that older content, so I am going to bring it back. My goal is to maybe do like 4 to 5 videos a week, one really edited, the others not really edited, kind of just like a story-based video. Yeah, so if you guys enjoy those videos, please show some love to the channel. I love making these videos, but at the end of the day, I need y'all watching them. I need y'all liking it. I need y'all subbing. That's kind of the only way I'm able to consistently make this content for y'all. But yeah, that's all I got to say. My editor's not going to be too happy about how long I went on here. But yeah, that's all I got. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, like I said, and I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.